Hello everybody, it's Silver. This is Atomfall. So Atomfall is an FPS, sort of pseudo open world FPS. It's a little bit survivally focused, so all this comes together to mean it's a little bit like an extremely British version of Stalker, or Wanker if you will, but please don't. By pseudo open world, I mean instead of one big contiguous open world space, it takes place in several large open areas separated by loading screens. So firstly, how it looks. I think this game looks pretty good. It is going for a very realistic look, lots of very high resolution textures and things that make it look very pseudo-realistic, but it also has an interesting use of color, mostly in the color green. I've noticed that pretty much everything green in this game really stands out a lot. They've put a lot of effort into making sure that specific color is really vibrant all the time. So anytime you see something green, it seems to take over the scene. And that includes basic stuff like grasses and trees and bushes and stuff. So when you're in the more verdant outdoor areas, like say Casterfell Woods, all of that greenery everywhere really makes it quite pretty looking actually. And there's also a bit of a focus on the color yellow. A lot of the UI elements have yellow involved in them, and also you'll find that in the environment, yellows are reserved for like industrial applications or machinery that you need to interact with. So yellow seems to be kind of the telltale color for go this way, there's stuff you can mess with here. But the art style is definitely very atmospheric and nice looking, and it also has just a little bit of like an Atom Punk style kind of underneath everything, especially when it comes to the larger, more industrial areas, especially towards the end of the game, and also stuff like the big robotic enemies. They have that sort of look, very much so. Soundtrack-wise, it's a lot of ambient and atmospheric music that doesn't really take too much attention away from the exploration that you're doing, although there are some tracks during the more actiony bits and combat and stuff that are, more obvious. They have more of a presence to them, and this is especially true, again, towards the end of the game when things get a lot more actiony and stuff. You're going to be hearing more active music rather than sort of exploration-y ambient music. So I think overall the music and art style is meant to be atmospheric. It's meant to sort of immerse you in this world, and it does a good job of that, I think. So overall, audiovisual presentation is pretty strong with this game. Mechanics-wise, it is a relatively traditional shooter with some slight survival elements, although you're not looking at stuff like hunger and thirst bars or anything like that. You don't have to eat food. Although there is plenty of food to eat, it actually restores health rather than like a hunger resource. But you'll notice that overall resource conservation is an extremely important part of this game, mostly because there's quite a lot of combat, but combat can be very resource intensive, and you don't have a lot of stuff that makes things safer and more convenient for you at hand at all times. You can't actually carry that much stuff on you at any given time, so you got to be a bit careful about what you're actually doing in the world. A lot of the combat you'll be doing is melee combat, because weapons don't have a condition in this game. They don't wear out and break or anything. So once you find a good melee weapon, you can keep it forever. And melee weapons are, of course, infinite use. They don't have ammo or anything. So there's a lot of melee, and there are also a lot of melee enemies in the game as well. So that helps you stick with a good amount of melee combat for a good portion of the game. But, of course, you'll also find that there are plenty of enemies that use ranged attacks. There are lots of guns in the game. And guns are really, really powerful, both for you and for the enemies. You'll notice that they are extremely lethal. They kill super quickly. So if there are enemies with guns in a given area, you've got to be super careful about taking them on, because if you try to rush them with a melee weapon, chances are they'll kill you before you actually reach them. But in terms of guns, for the most part, at first, you'll only be finding rusty guns. And rusty guns, they don't jam or anything. Like I said, there's no condition in this game, but they aren't super effective. They don't do as much damage as they could, and they're also not particularly accurate. So they are a bit of a desperate weapon to use, but still, this is pretty much your only reliable as they can be, ranged option early in the game. But you'll also notice that ammo is extremely scarce in this game, and you can't carry very much of it on you at any given time. So for instance, like say shotgun shells, you can only carry 20 of them at first. That is your maximum amount. So 20 is not very many, especially if you have a double-barreled shotgun. You will burn through that amount very quickly. They are going to be very useful if you use them well, but they're not going to last you very long. And the same goes with all the other ammo types like rifle, SMG, and pistol ammo, as well as arrows for bows. I would say arrows are probably the most efficient ammo type, because bows do quite a lot of damage. They fire very slowly, they're very accurate, and they don't rust or anything. So you can generally find a pretty good bow early on by fighting some druids out in the woods. And once you do that, just a simple bow can actually last you a really long time, and will probably be a good standby sort of secondary range weapon for most of the game once you get used to using it. They are slow, but they do good damage, and arrows are pretty easy to come by. There is a crafting system in the game, and you'll be crafting a lot of your resources because, like I said, resources are very scarce in the environment, so a lot of the stuff that you want to use, you'll be making yourself from all the bits and bobs that you find around the place. One of the most basic things, you'll start with the ability to craft, and in fact, the first thing that the game actually makes you craft is a bandage, which just takes some cloth and alcohol, which you'll find plenty of if you scavenge around, and bandages are super useful. They will relieve bleeding, they'll also give you some bleeding resistance for future attacks, and they restore a fair amount of health, about a third of your starting health gauge or so, with one bandage. So they're a nice, efficient way to heal yourself, as long as you can keep yourself supplied with them. But of course, there are better options if you're lucky with your scavenging, like say first aid kits, which restore way more health, pretty much a full gauge, but aren't exactly easy to come across. But you only start with a small sort of smattering of crafting recipes. The rest of them you have to find or buy in the world. So you'll often come across a lot of exploration rewards that are things like crafting recipes. And you can eventually make stuff like nail bombs and sticky bombs. There's recipes for improved guns. This is an important one. So those rusty weapons you've been finding, you can combine them together with some other materials like scrap and gun oil to make stock weapons, which are a lot more effective. They're much more accurate. And eventually you can combine multiple stock weapons together to make a pristine weapon, which is the best form of any given gun and is far more effective than any other form. But it is very resource intensive to make these because one pristine weapon takes 4 rusty versions of that weapon, as well as a fair amount of scrap and gun oil to actually produce once you're done with all of the production and crafting it all. So these are things that you'll work your way up towards slowly. You'll also find that any ranged enemies are valuable to kill because they will drop ammo pretty much every time of whatever type of weapon they're using, but they drop very, very small amounts. Someone using a shotgun will drop shotgun ammo, but they'll probably only drop 1 to 2 shells. So if it takes more than that many to kill them, then you're not even breaking even. So you want to be as efficient as possible when killing ranged enemies since they drop these useful but rare resources. There is also a skill system. There isn't any experience or levels in this game, but there are these little syringes of the training stimulants, aka brain juice or learning juice, as people in the game calls it. It's like this sort of resource you can find very rarely on shelves or desks in the game, and also you'll find these orange glowing crates called Bard crates that are super useful to find because they always have really good stuff in them and will always guaranteed have at least one stimulant in them. And you have a skill tree that you can spend these stimulants on to gain new passive skills. There are 4 different categories of skills, each one having 9 skills total, although when you start the game, you'll only have access to 3 skills in each category. The other 6 have to be unlocked by finding skill manuals or buying them out in the world. Each one will unlock 3 thematically tied skills. And these skills are pretty much always things that are very, very useful, so it's always worth finding these stimulants. And this is one of the main things that the game rewards good exploration for, is multiples of these so that you can use them to make yourself stronger. There are skills to make yourself more effective with firearms, more effective and efficient with bows. There are skills that increase your health gauge or make food heal you more. There are also skills that allow you to hold more resources and ammo. That's a really important one, I think, that pretty much everyone would want to get, since by default your max resource and ammo caps are very low. The ability to expand them a bit is nice. You also have an unexpandable inventory that's actually kind of separated in an interesting way. Your inventory consists of several small slots where any small items will go, like bandages, pistols, and other just sort of one-handed items basically can fit in these slots. But you only have a limited number of them. You also have 4 larger slots that are meant to contain only two-handed items like rifles or SMGs, larger weapons, cricket bats, stuff like that. Anything that takes 2 hands to handle basically goes in these slots. So you can only hold 4 items that are particularly large, and the rest of your smaller items go in these smaller slots that you have a bit more of. However, resources and ammo have their own inventories that are separate from these slots. Your health gauge does regenerate a little bit, but only if you sort of sit still for a little while and don't take damage for an extended period of time. It'll regenerate just a little bit, about 20% or so, although there is a skill on the skill tree that makes it happen faster and also makes it regenerate more of the gauge that you can get eventually. You also have a heart rate. Well, of course you have a heart rate because you're alive, but you have a heart rate gauge that actually measures it. And this acts as kind of like an inverse stamina gauge, whereas, a stamina gauge, as it runs out, eventually you can't run and stuff. In this case, once this gets full, you can't run. So this measures your heart rate, and as you do anything that exerts yourself, firing weapons, climbing stuff, landing from heights, sprinting throughout the world, all that good stuff, it will increase your heart rate. And the higher it gets, the more noise you make when you do stuff, so stealth becomes more and more difficult the higher your heart rate is. And also, I believe your accuracy wavers more and stuff when it's really high. And eventually when it maxes out at 180, by the way, which your character definitely needs to go to the hospital for, then you can not run or anything like that, and you've got to sit still for a second to get it to calm back down. Also, it goes down to 60 as its minimum, but if you're just walking around normal speed, it will hover at 90 pretty much all the time. Although, interestingly, because this is a very British game, you can make yourself some tea, and tea will actually have the effect of calming your heart rate down, making it decrease faster and increase slower, which is interesting. I'm pretty sure it doesn't work that way in real life. I think tea has caffeine in it, doesn't it? So, whatever. Story-wise, it is going for a story that's a little bit like a Stalker story, in my opinion, because it is very open-ended. You basically get a really simple objective right from the start of the game. Find the interchange. That's all you're told. You're not told what it is or where it is or how to find it or who might know about it. You're just told that you need to find it. And then you're put in this open world and told to basically go nuts. So this is an extremely open-ended game where you begin with a not particularly specific goal, and you've got to figure your way around it from there and find out what to actually do. I really like this structure a lot. It's a super open structure that rewards exploration very heavily and allows you to find all sorts of side content and stuff to do, and some of it will eventually link into main content that allows you to solve some of the mysteries and figure out where to go next. You'll also eventually start meeting characters that have the ability to help you get out of this place. You're in a zone that is sort of locked down. It's a quarantine area, so you can't just walk out, and you want to leave because you don't belong here. And you will eventually start finding characters that have plans to help you and themselves, of course, leave the zone. And it's up to you if you want to help any of them or trust any of them. There are multiple endings to the game depending on who you specifically trust or help throughout the campaign. So you'll find characters like, for instance, a mysterious voice on a telephone that will call you occasionally when you walk by phone booths. This voice is clearly not human. You don't know what it is, but it definitely doesn't sound human. And no one else can hear the phone ring but you. So whatever this voice is, it's definitely supernatural in some way, but it does seem to know more about what's going on than pretty much anyone else in the game. So it kind of instinctively makes you want to learn more about it. But you'll also find and rescue other people throughout the game that have their own plans, like, say, a Russian spy or a dubious doctor lady and some other people that all have their own ways to get out of the zone. And this means there are several endings to the game that you can actually get, depending on whose instructions you follow towards the end of the game. The game, in my opinion, really thrives on its sense of mystery because you're plopped into this area and you don't really know what's going on. There's a really good sense of mystery throughout the whole game. There's this background mystery of what is Oberon. You're told that there's this thing called Oberon that is at this facility that has pretty much caused all of the destruction and supernatural happenings and stuff that you see, but you're not actually told what or who it is. And it isn't until the very end of the game, when you finally reach the Windscale plant, that you actually see Oberon and figure out what it is. And from there, that's kind of when you decide who you want to fully trust and actually end the game with. But I think overall the game does a really good job of sort of playing its cards face down, so you're always investigating some mystery or another and never really fully understand what's going on. Even when you get an ending, it doesn't reveal everything. Like, for instance, I went with the ending that makes you trust the person on the phone because I wanted to know more about them. I was hoping the ending would tell me maybe some reveals about who they are or what they are, but it doesn't actually happen. The ending is a good ending in my opinion, but it doesn't actually reveal what this voice on the phone really is. You're still kind of guessing. I have my theories as to what this voice on the phone is, especially because it tells you specifically to kill Oberon, but I still am not entirely sure. I should also probably mention that there's a pretty good amount of side content in this game, and it's really good side content. Like, the side quests are not fetch quests. Even the ones that seem like they are fetch quests have a good amount of story to them that makes them feel like more than just go and collect 5 of these and bring them back. Here's some money, congratulations. There's actually no money in this game at all. There's a barter system where different goods are worth different amounts to each character, and you have to match a scale depending on what each character wants and what you're buying from them. So there's no cash in this game. But the side content is all very much worth doing because you get some pretty cool stories, some character-driven stuff that helps you understand a little bit more about what's actually going on here. And also you will get some useful stuff like some ammo and resources, as well as things like those training stimulants, and oftentimes some crafting recipes or some skill manuals from a lot of the side content. So it makes all this stuff very much worth actually taking the trouble to stop the main quest and go and do, and it makes the side stuff feel more substantial as a result. The average playtime for this game, I think, is really fair. You probably will take anywhere from like 10 to 15 hours or so to beat it. My playthrough took me about 14 hours total, and that was doing most of the side content, as well as opening myself up for possibly several endings and only deciding at the very end which one I wanted to fully go with. So I'm not going to call it a 100% playthrough because I'm sure I missed some stuff, but it was probably like a 90% playthrough. It was pretty much most of the content that you can actually find. I think that is a fair gameplay time for a game like this. I think that, those really good classic FPSs that have this sort of structure, like Stalker or BioShock or something like that, I think they'll have a kind of a similar amount of gameplay time, and it's pretty much all killer, no filler, which is what I look for in a game like this. I don't want a whole bunch of boring fetch quests and stuff to do that pad out the gameplay time, so it's technically 25 hours long, but like 15 hours of it are just mind-numbing and boring. That's not the case here. It is a mystery that is fun to solve all the way through. So my personal verdict is that Atomfall is definitely a worthwhile game to try. It is on Game Pass if you want to play it there, and I think it's actually worth its price, its asking price, if you want to buy it, because there's a fair amount of solid gameplay to it, and is just a well-paced and fun adventure all the way through. So if you're a fan of games like Stalker, or like maybe even stuff like Dead Space actually, and stuff like BioShock, then this game might be for you. It's got a very interesting and fun aesthetic and some really cool enemies to fight, although I will say the enemy variety is a little bit lacking in this game. That's probably the one criticism I would have of it. The enemies are fun to fight, but there aren't that many different kinds of them. But I would say because of the relatively good pacing, outside of that, or really the quite good pacing, that isn't as much of a problem as it could be. So yeah, overall, I'm a fan of the game. I think it's pretty solid, and I think it's something that you should definitely try out because of its fun mystery, kind of eldritch background stuff that's happening that makes it an interesting time to go through. I'll put the link in the description below this video to the Steam store page for Atomfall if you wish to check it out yourselves. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.